Koutou katoa. Welcome everyone to Ashburton Art Gallery and Museum. My name is Louisa and I am the Curator of Social History here at the museum. Thank you for being here today and joining us to celebrate the opening weekend of the SS Ventnor exhibition. In this exhibition we learn about the ship which sunk off Hokianga Harbour in 1902, carrying the remains of nearly 500 Chinese, mostly gold miners, being returned to their villages. When some of those remains washed ashore, local iwi and hapu buried them and passed the story down through the generations. The exhibition was created by the New Zealand Chinese Association in partnership with Heritage New Zealand Pohere Taonga, with support from Northland iwi organisations, and I would like to thank the New Zealand Chinese Association and Heritage New Zealand for their curatorial support. Today is the exhibition's second day open to the public, and will be on display until 16th of November. Before we begin, I will quickly go over some housekeeping. Nearest wharepaku toilet facilities are located just behind us here on the corridor upstairs. And in the case of an emergency, please follow myself, my colleague Katie here, waving, or our downstairs staff to the nearest exit. Our assembly point is in the visitor car park. This presentation will be recorded today and we will take photos during the event. And a reminder to turn off your phone or put it onto silent before we begin. So yesterday at the museum, we were fortunate to hear from Hannah King, a descendant of the Nang King family prominent here in Ashburton, and also a member of the Nang Wu family, descendants of Nang Zhou Qing, whose koiwi headed for reburial in China were on board the SS Ventnor. Today we are fortunate to hear from Keith Gordon, who will speak to us about his personal involvement with the search, discovery and exploration of a shipwreck which has been declared an archaeological site. A retired aircraft engineer now living in Auckland, Keith Gordon is a pioneer underwater explorer with extensive underwater and shipwreck exploration experience. He is an international fellow of the Explorers Club and is president of the New Zealand Underwater Heritage Group. With a keen interest in maritime heritage, underwater exploration expeditions have taken Keith to remote areas of the Aegean, Pacific and Southeast Asia to search for and explore historical shipwrecks. In addition to publishing SS Ventnor, Ghost Ship of the Hokianga, and Deepwater Gold, the story of RMS Niagara, and co-authoring New Zealand Shipwrecks, the 8th edition, he has published numerous magazine articles on maritime historical and heritage topics. So, without much further ado, please welcome Keith Gordon.
Thank you, Louisa. Am I switched on? Can you all hear me with this thing? Yeah. All right?
You will need to speak into
okay. I was wondering about that.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah. Anyway, it's only been to Ashburton for a while, and when I was asked to come down and talk about the Ventnor, I thought, well, Ashburton's a little way from the ocean, and we talk shipwrecks, so I thought it was something a bit different. Anyway, just a matter of interest, how many people here had ancestors on the Ventnor, or the remains of ancestors? Anybody? No? Anyway, I came a bit dressed for the cold too, and I got off at Christchurch and I've driven down here, and now I've peeled off my jersey, so if I take my shirt off after. Anyway, I've been involved with the steamship Ventnor shipwreck since 2000. Need me over here. Since 2012, and I'm still involved with various events surrounding the shipwreck, which has been described by the government, well, it has been declared by the New Zealand government as a New Zealand shipwreck of national importance. But my story of the Ventnor actually begins in southern China in the 1860s. Just to give you a bit of background about the miners, I'm not going to go into great detail. There's a lot of, and I think yesterday there was possibly more background was told. So, but when following the turmoil of the Red Turban Rebellion and the conflicts of the 1850s, Many men left the Guangdong province in southern China, leaving their families behind across the Pacific, seeking their fortunes in the newly discovered goldfields known as Gum Shan, or Gold Mountain of California and in Victoria, Australia. By leaving their families, they were seeking their fortune, hoping to make money to come back and to live quite happily ever after. The discovery of gold in Otago in 1861, hang on, we need to, it works. Yeah, just to give you an idea here, I'll just take to get these things working. Yeah, so they come down to Australia here. Am I okay there? And to the Victorian goldfields. From most of them came from around the Guangdong area and in southern China. Anyway, in 1861, gold was discovered in Otago, and many miners that from the Californian goldfields and the Victorian ones, there was quite a rush across to the Otago fields. That wasn't so much the people from China at that time, but there was quite a lot of Chinese miners working in Victoria. People would come down. So there was quite a rush to the centre of that, but as the gold in Otago started to get harder to find and that, many of the miners crossed over the divide to West Coast, where gold had recently been discovered there in 1885. Anyway, with the loss of customers and business, the Otago provincial government were concerned as they needed men to develop and expand the existing Otago fields. So aware of the skills of the hard-working Chinese miners on the Australian fields, they invited them to come across to work the Otago gold fields. So the first group of Chinese miners arrived in 1866, consisted of 12 miners. But by 1869, the numbers had increased to over 2,000. And by 1881, there were some 5,000 Chinese located in Otago, including 12 women. The majority had originated from the upper Panyu county of Guangdong. It was a harsh... Hang on, I have to keep doing this, don't I? The miners there. It was a pretty harsh environment. Existence, living in primitive conditions with snowstorms, floods and mining disasters. Many abandoned the mining hardships and set up small businesses such as market gardening and laundry. Oops. Choi Su Hoi, he's prominent in the story of the Ventnor. After working in the goldfields of both California and Victoria, and following the invitation from the Otago provincial government, he arrived in Dunedin in 1868 and set up business in 1869 at 24 Stafford Street in Dunedin. He became a respected, successful businessman and was well known in the province. He established a merchant warehouse building in 1895, which still exists today. That's the building earlier, and it still trades. The Su Hoi family is still trading from. It's quite an interesting shop to go in there, but it's still in business. The Cheong Sing Tong Society was founded in 1882, and they were formed to provide support for members, the gold miners, and that in their times of need. The society headquarters were set up at the Stafford Street premises of Choi Su Hoi, who was the society president at the time. A concern for the Chinese miners was the possibility that they may die in a foreign land. And it is a Confucian belief that for the soul to rest and be at peace, the bones of the departed must return to rest in their ancestral homeland. It's often referred to as the falling leaves returning to the roots of the tree. Otherwise, the soul would be homeless, an unsettled, hungry ghost, unable to rest until the bones of the deceased were shipped back to China for burial alongside their ancestors. Members made a payment to the society that in the event of their death, the society would look after and arrange for their bones to be returned to their ancestral homes. In 1883, the society carried out a mass exhumation of miners' remains around the South Island and arranged shipment to Hong Kong. And in 1883, 286 body remains of the miners were shipped on the steamship Hokianga from Dunedin and taken to Hong Kong, and from there they were dispersed to the various home villages which to be buried. With the success of this shipment, a second shipment was planned for 1902 on the steamship Ventnor. And there's some shots there taken back of some of the bodies, the remains being exhumed from cemeteries around, I think that's actually up in Auckland at the Waikumete Cemetery, but of course there's a lot of small graveyards right through Otago and scattered around, and for two or 3 years they gathered these remains and they brought them to a centre in just out of Dunedin to prepare them for the shipping. But so while the shipment was being prepared, Choi Su Hao, he passed away in 1901, and his son, Kampoi Su Hoi, became the president of the society and responsible for the shipment. So Choi Su Hao was now part of that shipment. There we go. Anyway, the coastal vessel Remu was chartered to transport the remains from Dunedin to Wellington for loading on the Ventnor. 172 coffins were loaded in Greymouth and the remainder in Dunedin, resulting in a total of 478 coffins on board. This is Kampoi Su Hoi here, overseeing the loading, and this is at Port Chalmers. And that's the two, Choi Su Hoi and another prominent man were actually encased in a Remu coffins. A lot of the others the remains were in calico bags and placed in boxes. Anyway, they were loaded on the Remu here, and the Remu went from Port Chalmers through to Wellington to meet up with the Ventnor. The Ventnor, let's just take a picture of it at Westport. It actually, after it arrived in New Zealand, I'll just point out a couple of things here that for afterwards. You notice this rear mast here and the cross piece up here, the bridge and the superstructure and the forward compartments, and down the back is what's called the poop deck. Anyway, the Ventnor actually, it brought a cargo of sugar in from Sumatra, Indonesia, to Auckland and unloaded it at the Colonial Sugar plant there up in Auckland. And from there it then sailed down to Westport, where it picked up about 5,300 tonnes of Westport coal for the British Navy station in Hong Kong. Westport coal was quite in demand, has been a very clean burning, and there's quite a lot of it was extracted there and sent up to Hong Kong. So it loaded up in a little bit about the Ventnor. It was only a year old, built in 1901, and it was operated and owned by Gower Harrison, a Scottish company. Just a little bit on the size. It was under the command of Captain Henry Ferry, and as I say, it picked up 3,557 tonnes of coal. And the coffins were loaded in Wellington, and the most of them are like the consignment from Dunedin was placed in a compartment and in sort of pigeonhole type racks and stowed in there. And Sue Hoy's coffin, he was actually put in a separate compartment on his own in a, as I say, an English style coffin and encased in rimu. And that now, when I mentioned the numbers that were shipped out from Dunedin, what happened was that was, what did I tell you, it was 400 and, I've got to get, it's interesting because numbers, old age numbers, I've got to, anyway, it wasn't 499, it was 480 something. But what happened was when they were loading in Wellington, the Cheong Sing Tong coffins were loaded in this compartment on the ship. Sorry?
Just as you keep going.
I got it. It was loaded in the compartment, but then further remains were loaded on in Wellington from the... Got to keep the old grey matter. There was 10 loaded on as deck cargo from the anyway from I was trying to recall the name of the society that they came from, but that still didn't bring it up to. That was still about 10 short from that 499, but that was what was manifest at 499. But so there must have been another 10 or so added on, also as deck cargo, and they still come up to just short of 499. But that was the actual manifested amount. No, I'm sorry, the manifested amount was less. So extra remains were loaded in Wellington, more from a different society. Anyway, the Ventnor set sail with its cargo of remains, headed for Hong Kong, and it left Wellington on October 26, 1902. And at Wellington, and it heading to Hong Kong. But as they sailed north, they were a bit close into the New Plymouth area, the Taranaki area, and they struck a reef, lodged onto a reef just off the coast, and they started taking on water. Anyway, the captain and that, taking into account the amount of water they were taking on, thought he could make it up around the top of the North Island to Auckland, where there was dry dock facilities, instead of going back to Wellington, because there wasn't the facilities there to do the repairs back then. So they started taking on water here, and as they headed north, it got worse and worse. And when they got up off the Hokianga here, she finally took too much water on the forehead, the bow went down, and the ship went down. It was this flag here is the Imperial Dragon flag that was in foot. And the Ventnor, because of its cargo it was carrying, was permitted to fly that flag in recognition of the cargo they had on board. Anyway, it went down in the evening, around 9 o'clock at night or so. Suddenly went down. There was 4 lifeboats on the ship. 3 pulled away all right. The 4th one, it went down with the wreck. So it was lost. There was 13 men on it. But also there was a crew of 41 on the ship. 9 of them were Chinese body attendants, elderly Chinese, and they were going back to Hong Kong, but they were overseeing, looking after doing the rites and all the other various ceremonies they needed to do on the way, and just keeping looking after them. So on that lifeboat there was 5 of them as well. So that lifeboat that went down was 13 altogether, including the captain and some of the officers. So there was a loss of life of 13. The other 3 boats, they pulled away with some difficulty. 2 of them, they could see the lighthouse at the Hokianga heads, so it wasn't too bad that night. They sort of rowed, and they got into the Hokianga harbour around 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning. That was 2 of them. The other boat, it didn't turn up. So in the following days, there was a bit of a search for it, and they did find it further up the coast in not too good a shape, but they survived as well. This is the entrance to the Hokianga harbour, and so that night it wasn't as rough as this that night, but they came in through the heads and they actually landed on the beach up here at Ompery. It's a beautiful harbour up there. I don't know if you've ever been there, and it's quite striking. But there's a bar across there, and it could get quite bad. There's been quite a few shipwrecks on that bar. Anyway, this is the surviving crew on the beach after arriving there, the next day or so. And you can notice there is a bit of a mix of various nationalities, and as I say, there was 4 of the Chinese elderly body attendants. They survived too, so they're amongst that the picture. Anyway, after it went down, there was a lot of concern and upset. The Chinese population down south are very upset, and Kampoi Suhoi, he actually chartered a boat to search for the wreck of the Ventnor out in the Tasman Ocean there, and it was quite an area to search. They spent about 3 months, I think, searching for the wreck, but with no results. And over the next few weeks, and that there was some remains and that washed up on the shores here, south of the Hokianga entrance and north here up at Miti, and the Maori people, seeing them, finding them on their beach and that, buried them, and that's no doubt part of the story you heard yesterday and that. And over the years, everybody forgot about the Ventnor. Well, it seemed to sort of went out of use. It was never found back then, and it wasn't until very late, in recent times, that the Chinese Association people and that did find that how the Maori had been looking after those remains that came ashore and buried them with dignity and that. But it's interesting, the remains that would have come ashore would have been the deck cargo ones. The Jeong Sing remains, they went down with the wreck, and I'll mention after, they're still there. So those remains that actually, there was around 20 probably that were on deck cargo, they would have been the ones that came ashore. And there's reasons for that, obviously. Anyway, I got involved back in 2012 or so by a group who wanting to find the wreck. They wanted to do a film and that, but the first thing was to try and find the wreck. So we set about, trying to find a wreck when you got no position. It's a big area where actually we knew it had sunk off the entrance there, but where? There's a big area there to cover. Anyway, we came across a fisherman, a good friend he was in the end, but who helped us a lot. And they used to go fishing out here, game fishing and that, and they used to have a spot they found it was very good for fishing and that, and they used to call it I think the Sweet Reef or something like that. So he mentioned that to us, and he knew we were looking for the wreck, and he had noticed sometimes on these fishing lines some rust on the lines and that coming up. So he suspected, well, perhaps that reef they thought was a reef was the wreck. So he took us out there, and when I looked on his depth sounder, like the fishing sounder, there was this image on the seabed. And I knew straight away it was a shipwreck. And knowing that there was only one major shipwreck that would have ever sank up there, so I was very confident it was the Ventnor. Anyway, I went back about 3 or 4 weeks later with this remote operated vehicle that I had. And these remote operated vehicles back then, I have had this one for some years, but they weren't sort of known too much. But nowadays, of course, with drones and all that, you can sort of say, well, they're much like the drone. They electric motors and that, they go up and down, sideways, forwards and backs. There's a camera that can rotate and pan and tilt, video camera, lights, claw and that, and that's connected to the surface with a cable which supplies the video back up there, and you can control it with joysticks and that in front of a control screen. And so we went up there with that, and also on board was we had GoPro cameras extra, or a GoPro camera there just as an addition, some sonar and other bells and whistles, you know, these toys you got these days. But anyway, we put the ROV down, and in fact when we went out, we had a Maori people with us. We had a Kamata, a Maori priest with us, and before we put the ROV down, he did a prayer, a karakia over the spot, and blessed the spirits and also what we were doing. And so after following that, we sent the ROV down. The depth was around 150 metres, about over 500 feet. So, but the camera we had on that was not the greatest, but the little GoPro was pointing down, and as after we're checking the film on the GoPro, the main camera, we landed on the seabed on a mount coal, and there's almost coal around us, and I swing the camera up, and there's a silhouette of the wreck there against the skyline. So we knew, and with all this coal, we knew we had this Westport coal, so it helped to confirm to us that it was the Ventnor. And the GoPro coming up, this is just sort of a black and white, it showed looking down like a bird's eye or fisheye view of the wreck as it was coming up. And this is the donkey boiler, which you'll see more later, and you can see a lot of the deck is missing. You're looking down on wreck. So okay, we knew we had found the Ventnor, all right. So anyway, we wanted to get some better pictures than that, and the question came up, were the remains still on board the wreck? Because it sort of disintegrated a lot, and a lot of stuff had come off it. So we, friends of ours and that, we went out, or people were involved with technical diving. The depth is very deep as far as diving goes, and you've got to be a specialist, what we call technical diving a lot, where at that depth you need to be using a mixed gas. If you breathed air, you get intoxicated, but also you could convulse deeper than 250 feet or so. You could get convulsions. So to overcome the problems there, instead of our air like we breathe here is 21% oxygen and about 70 or so percent of helium, and the rest is a bit of, 70% of nitrogen and a bit of other stuff. So we replaced that with just using 9% of oxygen and 70 or so percent of helium, replacing the nitrogen for the fix. Now, 9% oxygen, of course, you wouldn't survive here now if we tried to breathe. But under sort of the pressure of gases, which I won't go into, that's okay. And so with using that special mixture, it can allow them to get down to that depth. And the equipment they're using is what we call rebreathers, which gives more time, which you actually are rebreathing back your air you breathed out, and it gets scrubbed through chemicals and refreshments. It gets rid of the CO2 and goes circulating. Now that can allow the diver to stay down a lot longer than the old aqualungs and things you see on TV with all the bubbles coming out, because you're not exhausting all that gas. So anyway, these people that we're involved with are very highly skilled and a lot trained. This one here is the first divers were there. That's Sandy Varron. She's a young lady, quite a character. And the equipment they're using, like, is their rebreather on the back. They've got computers on there, two computers back up, and that monitors the gas mix correctly, and all sorts of other toys. Anyway, they did a dive on the wreck site using electric scooters to power down the shot line, put down to the wreck, and which we'll see a bit more later probably, and arrived on the wreck and find it sitting upright, and all the superstructure and that, a lot of that's gone, and it's in quite a deteriorated condition. Now, one of the things, the early reports of where the bodies or the remains were stowed said they were stowed below the poop deck in this compartment, special compartment set up with the pigeonholes and that. And Suhoi was, as I say, was housed in a special compartment on his own. Now the poop deck is down here, this part of the ship. And also they said above where the remains were, comfortable quarters were set up for the body, the Chinese body attendants. So all that was more or less pointing down there. That was mainly from media reports and all that. So the divers, when we first went down, said, well, to see if we can find whether these remains may still be on the ship. So most of the initial dives and that were from about midships here and through to the stern, especially down around this area. Now these holes here were full of coal. You could find the coal. The poop deck, a lot of the structure down there had gone, which we'll see a bit after. And so over the years, there's a number of dives, visits. We'd keep searching around this area. We went sort of up here a bit, sometimes did a quick excursion around here along, but you can see the condition of the structure, and that is just, all that superstructure up there is gone. What's basically left is the remains of the hull down here. And all this superstructure, the cabins and the cooking area and all that, it's completely gone, while it's all fallen apart. This is one of the divers swimming along the outside the wreck, and what we call the shell plating, which is on the outside of the steel plating on the outside of the wreck, riveted on, a lot of that has come off. So you're looking at the ribs, the structure of the hull, but you can look through into the inside there, and you can see that's coal and that and there. And as a diver, you can see he's got his rebreather. These tanks, they're backup stuff. So in case he has a failure with that, with his rebreather, he can switch over to these mix here for emergency to get him back to the surface. So we explored quite a bit during that time. I mentioned that donkey boiler, on the earlier old ROV picture. And the donkey boiler used to be used to provide steam to run the machinery when they're in port, the loading, the winches and stuff like that. So this is the donkey boiler now. And it's, it was up a lot higher. I mean, it's all fallen down, it's laying there. This is the funnel, what the remains of the funnel, the lower part, the smokestack, and as you can see, twisted pipes and stuff. And that's a bit of the donkey boiler there. And the same, you look at the structure, like where the decks, where it's all sort of gone. A lot of it is just it's over the years. It's just these wrecks. They don't stay in pristine condition when they go down. They're subject even to bacteria. They're biologically imploding. The bacteria eat the iron and that, and as well as the corrosive actions and that. So in time, it will all collapse on the seabed. It'll just become a mound of carbon, more or less, once over the years. But in the situation that's there now, also a lot of the problems was a lot of damage has been done by trawlers in the past. The trawl nets getting caught up or dragged across the wreck, especially when the superstructure was there, the wooden superstructure and it. Anyway, remember I pointed to that aft mast and the cross piece at the top. Well, that's it now. And it's laying down flat. The whole thing's collapsed, but that's that cross piece there to so you can. A lot of fish life around, crayfish, all sorts of. There used to be a lot of big harpooker there, but with the fishermen once they knew the wreck was there, well, they sort of flogged it a bit, and so a lot of you don't see a harpooker there now. And down the stern is the propeller there, just a single propeller, and a trawl net caught up around it. And one of the interesting things here was we used to be kept. How do we know it's the Ventnor? People were expecting us to find, can you find something with the name Ventnor painted on it? I said, well, you're not going to find that nowadays. But it was interesting. I got plans and stuff from Greenwich in England back the old days of the original information. And one of the things we found, there was a drawing there of the rudder, was a patented rudder. And it had a certain type of hinge. The hinge mechanism was sort of patented. And by comparing the drawings and that, yes, we had the same patented rudder on the ship. So yes, that was one of the things that helped to confirm to us that it was the Ventnor. The other interesting thing is the rudder is hard over to the right. The divers, it's not, I don't have a picture on this slide, I think, but we found the rudder indicator. It's still down on the ship, and the needle which shows you which way the rudder is, when you're steering, the coxswain could see, how many degrees the rudder was. Well, it showed that indicator showed the rudder was over hard right, and sure enough, the rudder was over. And what happened, of course, when it was starting to sink, the captain tried to swing it around to get it across and beach it, but it was so heavy with water up the bow, the front part of the ship, he just couldn't control it. But there's the rudder still hard over right. The rudder indicator still indicates 40 degrees hard right, but she wasn't going to go around hard right. So anyway, the divers diving on the Ventnor and the depth it's in could only have about 25 minutes on the wreck, so rather limited to what you could do. But using those electric scooters, you could cover quite a bit of ground and go down inside. So to do 25 minutes down there, it used to take about 6 hours in water for them to come back up, 6 or 7 hours, and stopping and decompressing on the way up. And this is just closer to the surface. We had what was called a decompression station, where they could hang on, they'd wait and maybe play music or something. They had various things and get some of that gear they didn't need taken off them until they finished their actual decompression schedule. And this trapeze type thing was with buoys on the surface, so we could, rather than jerking up and down, once they were on there, you could disconnect it from the boat, and so they would just float along with the current. maybe for 3 or 4 hours, and until they'd finished, and we'd bring them back to the surface. Now, the question was, were the remains still on the wreck? And seeing a lot of that condition of the wreck, I myself was thinking, no, they're not on this wreck anymore. Especially looking at that poop deck area where they were meant to be reported as being stored, it was all gone. So my thinking was, they could be scattered out around the ship as part of the debris field. Anyway, we went back up with another ROV, a bit of a newer one from our older one. Could do all sorts of singing and dancing things, stand on its end and that. And we're there mainly this time to get some high definition film of the wreck to use. We want to do a photogrammetry model of the 3D model of the wreck so people could understand how the wreck looked. And we're using this very high definition camera on this ROV. We're going to use that. And part of that was hopefully we could do a whole immersive model of the ship, so you could put on your 3D glass thing and you could walk around as though you're walking on the wreck. You've seen it these days, it's part of... So that was the objective. Anyway, we got there and it was decided, John, because it's a spiritual thing, the chap that was heading up the Ventnor project wing, he was quite spiritual, he was a married chap, and he always felt the spirits were telling him this. It always kept driving him along for years. And with this day we got out there and John says, no, we'll go and see if we can, ROV, have another look to see if we can try and find if these remains are there or not. So we thought, all right, John, So we sent this ROV down, and straight away we went down. We were up the forward end then, up the bow area. And when the ship sank, it went down nose first. So when it struck the bottom with a hell of an impact, it actually cracked, cracked the hull there. So we came down, we're up alongside the hull, and here, sure enough, there's this crack there. But the other thing we came across, and we hadn't seen much on the wreck in the past, we'd been diving it for 9 years, or I had divers down, but sometimes it might 3 or 4 years before they were last there. And this time too, I think it was about 4 years since we'd been to the wreck. But we came across this magnificent black coral tree growing up off the side of the hull. So it took the ROV up over the top of the hull, and we're up for it. So we flew the ROV across the deck, and there was an opening in the deck where it sort of rotted away by the number 1 hold. And because you could tilt this ROV, you just sort of nosed it down into the thing. And I'm looking at the screen, and at that time, an albatross landed alongside. And our skipper said, you hardly ever see these albatrosses around here. And my friend who was handling the tether for the ROV, he said, the next thing another one lands there. And I'm looking at the screen from the video coming back up from the ROV, and the next thing I see these remains, bones and that there. So it was very, very spiritual in a way. We often think a lot of incidents like that, things used to happen, and you really think so. So we didn't stay long. We just recorded some film and left. So we'd found yes, the remains are there. They weren't found by human intervention, but they were found by technology. So even to this day, nobody has been where those remains are, only a robot. So anyway, some of you are probably quite familiar. There was quite a lot of backwards and forwards stuff went on for a while, which I won't get into. There was accusations, there was various things and that. But anyway, earlier the Ministry of Culture and Heritage, or Heritage New Zealand, they had declared the wreck as an archaeological site, which was fair enough. But under New Zealand law, ships that are pre-1900, shipwrecks, are automatically a archaeological site. But the Ventnor, having sunk in 1902, it didn't come under that category as an archaeological site. So under a lot of pressure and that, the heritage people declared it as an archaeological site, and it's the first time that's been done, and it's the only time, actually. So that meant that you could still go down, you could still dive, film it and that, but you weren't allowed to disturb anything, which was fair enough. But prior to it becoming an archaeological site, we did bring up some artefacts, because one of the things was some of the people that were involved, especially some people with Chinese connection, they wanted to see something to, how do we know that's a shipwreck? How do we know it's the Ventnor and all that? So often on a ship you'll find things, even the serial number. Sometimes you'll find the ship's name marked on it, even plates, crockery and that. So we brought up some items with the idea that there could be a serial number or a maker's name and that could help to prove, yes, this is the Ventnor. So we brought up, there was 5 artefacts that were recovered. And one of them was this little bell, but you can see how heavily encrusted it is in that. So I carried out conservation on it, and okay, it was in quite fragile shape. And anyway, we had this cleaned up quite nicely. Another item was this item, and it was actually a lamp holder. And after conservation, there's a lot of work to conserve these items so that they will last. You just clean it up. You've got to go through quite a rigmarole with electrolysis and stuff to stabilise everything. Another item was a porthole. Sometimes portholes have serial numbers or even a ship's name stamped on it, and that's how it was recovered, and that's how it came out afterwards after the conservation. Another item was a very small, very delicate, thin dish like that. And okay, after soaking in fresh water for months and that to stabilise it, it came out. We left it in this sort of condition. But it's interesting when you get this plate. I've seen it before, very fine china, and you get it under the light. You can actually see an image. You can't see it in here. An image on the whole plate, and what it was is of an oriental scene. Now this ship, the Ventnor, also used to go to Japan a lot, so whether it's Japanese or whether it is Chinese or whether it might have been something that was part of the Chinese body attendants' equipment and that they had there, we don't know. But anyway, there's also a telegraph. It's not here. It's still undergoing conservation. Telegraph, was up on the bridge. Engines full ahead, stop, reverse, that type of thing. Ding, ding. You've seen them in the films probably. And it was quite a large object. You'll see it in the video if we get around to it. But today, there's after the now it's a archaeological site. We'd come across quite a lot of other stuff, artefacts that are there. And in the rubble you see the little dishes and things are there. It's amazing how these things will survive a shipwreck like this and getting without being broken up. And there was even there was a Liam Perrin's Worcester sauce bottle there. We thought, oh well, the crew, it had been an English ship, that must have been something, and other items there. And there was these units, things like an urn, and we thought, what the heck are these? And one of the divers went down, and picture, and he saw this stuff in the urn, and he thought, oh, is that bones? You know, is it body remain? He came up, he says, I think I found bones, you know. We said, hell, so we reported it to the police, the local police station. They reported it to Wellington. We got a big message from Wellington. We want you to go and bring one of these up. I mean, it's an archaeological site, but the police says, no, we were telling you what to do, not heritage. So that's all right. And they wanted a policeman to come out with us while we do it, because they wanted to see if it was human remains. But in the meantime, you know, we could read this stuff. So we got on the old phone and go into Google and put the name in there, and up it comes, oh yeah, this company, they made water filters. And what these things were are actually water filters. They had carbon and stuff inside, and there was a number of them around. They still are there. And so that was the end of that. But later, when we did find the bones, and we reported it to the police, didn't hear anything. And it was quite a thing for a start. But this picture here was just taken up. We went back out about 2 months ago, I think it was, and just did a quick one dive because the weather packed up. But the sort of interesting thing that I took off the video there, you see is a teapot of water. Yeah, look at it, there it is there. I thought, well, what's that made of to be surviving amongst all this sort of stuff? Is it silver? Well, it wouldn't be silver because it'd be black, but it's still there, and unfortunately it's going to disappear. But it would be interesting to know what, there'd be a maker's name on it and all that. But there's still a lot of stuff down there now. Also, unfortunately, what's happening, or what we have actually complained a bit to the heritage people, was because the fishermen are going out there now all the time. There's fishing competitions out there, and there's all these boats go out around putting down anchors with chains and that. And of course they land in there and amongst the crockery and stuff, and that we're saying, well, here you are, you make it an archaeological site to protect it. What about the fishermen? And they said, well, what do you mean about the fishermen? So we said to them, oh, we hadn't thought of that. So, you know, it's sometimes you wonder what. Anyway, with the Ventnor being found, that the Chinese Association, and they've done quite a bit of work and erected various things in remembrance. And this is called the Ventnor Garden, and it's in the dock park there where the big forest, where the Waipua forest is, which is nearby. And you can see they've planted kauri trees, small kauri trees, and set up plaques. These were the first remembrance stuff that was put up there. You can read some of there. It's thanking the Maori people for looking after the remains that the Chinese, and it's in Maori and in English and in Chinese. And also some of the family, they have this Ventnor Grove, the board, where you can, people recorded, mainly families, and there you can see the Suhois, Donald Suhoi, for instance, there, Virginia Chong and others. And also when there was used to be a shop there with a dock, and they had joss sticks there that you could, you know, available if they wanted to go and do their thing there. The other one, you probably, no doubt, it's been talked about, is this memorial that the New Zealand Chinese Association managed to get funds together, and Shane Jones been up there. He gave them 100,000, you know, for all towards it. And it's magnificent, and that's been erected on the shores of the Hokianga harbour there, at the centre, the manor centre, the footsteps of Kupe, the Maori people centre they've done. It's a magnificent place, cost a few million, and if you're ever up there, it's well worth seeing. But on here, oops, you can see they've recorded all the names that they've been able to find recorded that of the remains that were on the ship. One of the problems, I believe, is trying to connect them back to family. A lot of the Chinese then had nicknames too, to try and get back to their full Chinese name is, in some cases, has been a bit of a problem. Here there's more thank you stuff. It was quite thing. And anyway, the dedication of the memorial was quite an event. As you can see, it was held at the manor, the Maori Footsteps of Kupe Centre. Up here, you can see there's a lot of, even the Chief of Police from Wellington was there. There was politicians, there was, you name them, they were there. And here we got Winston Peters and Shane Jones presenting a Maori poa, I think they're called, to the Chinese Association people. In return, they presented a greenstone thing there. And part of the ceremony was the white line dance. I do see some, I had a quick look at the display the museum's got there, and there's quite a lot of this is recorded there and tells you more the background of what, I've got to try and cover in a hurry. And following the white line dance, they burn the white line, and this is a very special one. It's like a funeral ceremony thing, and it's really held mainly for mainly high dignitaries and that. But it rained too. It was raining quite bad, but it was very moving, the whole event. Another, once again, I see that featured also in the display there. It tells you a bit more of the background of it. This is up at Miti Miti, north of the entrance, where some of the remains were found washed up on the beach. It's been erected, the Red Gate Memorial. Here's the visiting Buddhist priest was there. He's doing a blessing there, and the Komata Maori, the local Maori guy, doing his prayers there. And in honour of our ancestors, may their spirits find peace. May the blessings of the ancestors run down the generations. And the question is, what's really going to happen with these remains? There's been a lot of discussion, a lot of indecisions that's been going on for a while. Choi Suhoi, there's still, back in China, there's still a grave there waiting for him, a family grave. And actually the family did bury a silver plaque there in remembrance for him. But it's a Feng Mu, I think it is called, and it is there. But in the meantime, as I say, this wreck is collapsing. It's, in fact, each time we go there, you can see more deterioration. This picture here was taken just a couple of months ago when we were last there, but you can see there's more shell platings come off, and in time, a lot of this hull structure is going to start collapsing in time. Now the remains, they're in this compartment up the bow there. That's where we found them, and as I say, they're actually in an enclosure on their own, so they're actually in the hull. But in time, all that's going to collapse in there too. So there's been a lot of discussion, and various people. I know the Chinese Association have debated it at length, and I know some of the families, one family in particular, very prominent family tied with us, who actually are involved with us they want to try and get the remains of their ancestor out and get it back to, for a burial back in China, so his spirit can be at rest. It can be done, but it's going to cost money. But at the same time, there needs to do it. There's a number of parties have to decide what to do. And the thing is, these miners too, they all paid their to the to the society in case they did bury. They wanted to go home and be buried. And there's a lot of the feeling that, okay, they should be just left there now, you know. But really, it's not as though they're sitting there as a nice, pristine enclosure, you know, like a monument. It is collapsing, it is falling apart. And, yeah, it's a big question. It's no doubt it's going to be debated for a while, I think. Anyway, just a quick one there. There was a film done, documentary done by the Dunedin people down there with partnership with the Chinese TV people about Duncan Suhoi and his son Peter, I think, and about this whole situation and about Duncan and Peter going back to China to visit their home village, their old home, the grave, and their wishes, or Duncan's wishes for his great-grandfather's remains to go back to China. It's a video, you know, it's a documentary, and if you Google The Lost Voyage, you'll get the whole thing to watch. I wrote a book on it all and what's happened and what's transpired. I published it about 2 years ago. If any of you is interested, there's 4 copies there, but there's also some leaflets there giving you some information. If anybody ever wants to order it, they can email to me. But just one thing too, I mentioned, as I said, the only film that's ever been done of the remains is from the ROV, but we've never shown those images to anybody. So it's out of respect to the Chinese people, we don't show them. But basically, what I can say is that they are scattered there. There's quite all together there and mixed up a bit. The coffins themselves, the wooden cases, have gone now, so the remains are sort of just scattered on in the compartment where they are. Yeah, thank you.